This is The Camp with Zach Heilprin and the Athletics' Jesse Temple.
Yes, welcome into The Camp, a special season preview episode of The Camp. I'm Zach Heilprin. That is the Athletics' Jesse Temple. We are now less than a week away from the Badgers getting their season going against Buffalo. They will do so on Saturday at home. Camp Randall Stadium back in the Luke Fickell area. We'll get started officially. We're going to go through everything. I'm not going to talk a ton about Buffalo. We'll get that into Tuesday. And then our first episode of Temple and Heilprin, live from Monk's Bar and Grill in Sun Prairie on Thursday from 6 to 7. We're going to be out there. We'll do our picks out there, game picks out there. Really excited about doing that all season long. We're going to be there all season long, every Thursday, 6 to 7. You can listen on Zone Madison. You come out and see us. We'd really appreciate that. You'll also be able to listen to it via podcast. Just go search Temple and Heilprin and subscribe to that RSS feed. All right, let's get into this, Jesse. I said the other day, and we're going to get to it in a little bit, that we're giving away tickets for the opener to the Buffalo game. The only requirements here, there's two requirements. One, you subscribe to our Instagram, which is the Camp Podcast, and then you answer a trivia question, and I'm going to give you the trivia question here at some point in the show. I'm not going to make it that easy for you and just give it to you off the top. I want you to listen to at least a little bit of this. It's a very, very easy trivia question. I'm not trying to make it difficult for you, but we'll be doing that here in just a little bit. First things first, how you doing?
I'm great. This is a big week for us, I feel like, Zach. We got Sunday, Tuesday rotation, our first live show, and even bigger week for Badgers fans because it has been a long offseason. They usually are the most exciting offseason that I can remember. And finally, thank God, we get to see a game and see what this team looks like. So I'm excited.
Yeah, can't wait for it. Buffalo is coming off I believe a 7-6 season where they started out a little bit slow. I think they started 0-3. They played at Maryland last year and lost 31-10. So they're opening up against a Big Ten opponent for the second straight season. Again, not going to talk a ton about Buffalo today. We'll do that later in the week if people are actually interested in that. I've done a little bit of research on Buffalo, Jesse. Well, but again, we'll get to that later this week. This is our season preview episode. So we're going to dive into a lot of things, season-long type of things. And I'm going to start with this. Even though it is a season-long thing, your biggest question entering week one as Wisconsin gets ready to face Buffalo here.
It's probably obvious, but what's this offense look like against somebody other than Wisconsin's defense? I certainly expect the Badgers to put up a lot of points, but I'd like to see what it looks like. How is the wide receiver rotation? How good is Tanner Mordecai? So that's where I'm at right now is let's see this air raid offense in motion.
When you talk about that air raid offense, what is the biggest question then? Is it just what it looks like or how it performs or whether they're able to hit the ground running? Because that, to me, I think is probably my biggest question about the offense is can they hit the ground running just after what you have done for so long to then jump into this new offense? I think it's going to be a little bit tough for that to happen. But again, Phil Long has done it in other places he's been at.
I feel like I've got 5 questions based off that one question about the offense because everything is unknown. And yes, we've seen a lot of practices. Obviously, we had the chance to see all 15 spring practices, believe 9 fall camp practices. And yet it doesn't look like it's going to look like in a game, which we've said on numerous occasions. And Phil Longo even talked about it, the first scrimmage that they had. It's can be sort of frustrating for an offensive coordinator because they get down to the 17-yard line, but they ran their 8th play or whatever it is. And Luke Fickell has a script. And so they move on. So they really haven't gotten, at least based on what we've seen, a ton of looks in straight up move the ball. Everyone's getting tackled. This is what real football looks like. So I want to know and I know we'll talk about this later, but run pass ratio. How do they use Braylon and Chaz? What's the carry distribution? How many pass catching opportunities do they get? How do they rotate the top 6 wide receivers? Who's going to be the leading wide receiver? How good is Tanner Mordecai? How fast do they play? Will all the snaps come before 30 seconds? I know, right?
Take a breath.
I know.
Man.
That's what I'm saying. I got at least 5 questions off that one question. And that's why this season opener, which otherwise would be a snore, I think, is so fascinating.
I would completely agree with you. There are so many fascinating aspects of it. It was kind of like when we were talking about spring ball and desperately wanted to see what this was going to look like in spring. And now this is just amped up to a different level, what we could potentially see on Saturday against Buffalo. So yeah, I mean, that's a huge question going into this season. I guess since you took that, I guess we'll go to the other side of the ball and defensively. How much does this dollar package get used? And is it going to end up being their base defense? That to me, and maybe that's just a very specific question on what this defense will look like, but it really is, because there are a number of different ways that they could go. They call themselves multiple. So it's not like they're going to be this specific defense every single time. They're going to have an opportunity to play a whole bunch of different looks at people, but the dollar package is the new thing, right? It's the new thing that, they had 6 DBs on the field at a time last year against Washington State. So it's not like they haven't done this a little bit in the past, but this is going to be a new thing. And I'm interested to see and anxious to see what it looks like when you have Hunter Wohler and Kamoi Latu and Travion Blaylock on the field together, and what kind of chaos the defensive line can create. And then also obviously what Hunter Wohler can do in his varied positions, but that all stems from the dollar package.
I was sure you're going to ask what the punt average and hang time average are. That's got to be one of the top 3 biggest questions of the season, right? No, because they're not going to punt, obviously.
Not punting on Saturday. Maybe we talk about that against Washington State, but they ain't going to be punting on Saturday against Buffalo. No, it's fun. It's a fun thing to talk about because there are certain people, and I'm not naming names, have a little bit of a session with a left-footed punter that is from Australia and can do the rugby style stuff. He may or may not have previously hosted a show with me. It's kind of disgusting, his obsession with it. That's not me. I'm anxious to see what Atticus Bertrams does, but if we don't hear his name on Saturday, I think fans will be just okay with that, unless you have issues. So
specialists are people too. Just remember that. Zach.
They are specialists. And we're going to see Nathaniel Vakos and maybe Nate Van Zelst. We're going to see them on Saturday. And I suspect we're going to see Atticus Bertrams as well and Peter Bowden as well. So yes, specialists are people too. And they are certainly going to be a part of this conversation if I get to them. All right. Fill in the blank here, Jesse. We're not talking about blank right now, but we will by the end of the season. And essentially, the under the radar player that we're not talking about right now that we will be by the end of the year.
I'm going with Darian Varner. And I just did a story that published on The Athletic ranking the 15 scholarship transfers that came in based on expected production out of fall camp. So what we've seen so far. And I had him, I think 11th or 12th, very low, which really speaks to the types of guys that they brought in that are absolutely a part of the 2 deep. Whereas what we saw with Varner was a rotation. It felt like there were 4 guys that were playing more consistently ahead of him, at least. You could throw Ben Barton into the mix too. But Varner's also a guy that missed all of spring, missed the last 2 games last year at Temple with a foot injury, and I think they're still trying to work back. And I simply can't ignore what he did at Temple last year, no matter what his weight was, no matter what you want to say about the level of competition. There are some very good teams in the American Athletic Conference, even if the Big Ten is a little bit different. What was it, 7.5 sacks, 12.5 tackles for loss, something like that. Outstanding. And those numbers are out there, and they show that he is proven. And so I wonder down the road whether he can make some pretty big leaps here during the season and establish himself, because they brought him in to be a playmaker. And Luke Fickell has said that what he brings is an explosiveness that is a little bit different from the rest of the group. That's why they wanted him. So I'm really intrigued by him. And we haven't talked about him a ton other than the intrigue of what it would be like seeing him in fall camp. But I think he could have a really big impact with that defensive line group, which I think is still looking for those big time types of playmakers.
It's a very good pick because it is a guy that I think a lot of people were excited about coming into fall camp. I shouldn't even say fall camp, but back when he came in from Temple, there were people excited, missed all of spring, wasn't cleared until the first, into fall camp to actually take part in full team drills. So yes, agree with that one. Another guy that we have talked about a little bit, but no one ever saw coming, and I think we're going to be talking a lot about him by the end of the year, is Tucker Ashcraft, because he is a guy at a position where they need people and where it seems like he has been, not just because of the injuries, but he has moved his way up into playing time conversation. And it feels like he's a guy that can do both in the pass game, and they trust him as a competent run blocker at this point. But they need somebody at that tight end spot. And while I'm a big Hayden Rucci guy, and I think he's going to have a nice season and probably his best season, it wouldn't take a ton, receiving wise, because he hasn't been asked to do that a ton, and he's been hurt. But I think Tucker Ashcraft is a guy that maybe we're not talking about a ton of right now, but we will be by the end of the year.
I was talking to Tucker's high school coach recently, and they used him a little bit as a wide receiver, which you can understand at the high school level. Luke Fickell mentioned, and I know we've addressed this before, but in recent weeks, that he thinks of Tucker as somebody who's got the body type or the physicality of what Wisconsin's tight ends have been in the past, but also the skill set of what he believes the tight ends are going to be in the future. It really feels like the perfect mix. And obviously the opportunity didn't come along without some other people falling off, without Jack Eschenbach and Clay Cundiff moving on from the program. And then there have been injuries to Riley Nowakowski and Jack Pugh dealing with the personal situation, but he's taken advantage of that. And honestly, even before those guys, Riley and Jack, when they were still practicing, he was starting to get more reps. You saw him getting first team reps. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he's been a storyline here early because to me kind of came out of nowhere, but no one's actually seen him play, and I think he's going to be a real big part of this offense.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Blank will be considered Wisconsin's best player at the end of the season.
So part of me wants to...
can add on to this. Is it the best player in your mind right now, too? But go ahead.
Well, part of me wants to go with Muma Jongmeta because I think he's going to have an amazing season, but I have to go with somebody offensively if we're going to spend all offseason talking about it. I'm going to go with Tanner Mordecai, even though Braylon Allen is probably the obvious pick, but I think Tanner's going to have a really good season. And I know we'll get into this later in terms of maybe some of our over-unders. I'm basing a lot of that on what Phil Longo has been able to do with his quarterbacks at his first two stops at the Power 5 level. And you can debate all you want, the lack of success in the red zone or the team not winning enough games. The quarterbacks put up numbers, and I think Tanner is going to do that. We've talked multiple occasions now how he feels like he's got a ton to prove. And this is kind of like, I mean, it's a mini NFL season to him, obviously. He's here for 6 months or 8 months, or I guess a year, however, whatever it'll end up being, because he came in January, but he's here for this season, and he's here to make a statement, and I think he will.
Yeah, Braylon Allen, Tanner Mordecai, Muma Jongmeta, Hunter Wohler. I mean, you could throw a bunch of names in there, but who's the guy that's generated the most NFL buzz, would you say? I think it's Jack Nelson. Jack Nelson's a guy that's generated buzz, and I think ends up, and what we're talking about here, right? Who's the best player at the end of the season? And who would be drafted? Who is the best player, which would then lead itself to who is going to get drafted the earliest?
Okay. I don't look at it that way, but I'm interested to hear your...
So it's Jack Nelson for me. It's Jack Nelson. Like, he is the guy that everyone's pointing to, that he could be the guy that breaks Wisconsin's streak here of not having a first round draft pick. He could be by the end of the season considered as their best player. Now, as someone who does not study offensive line play, I have no idea if that's the case or not. I'm basing it on what everybody else is talking about. If you want to look at the numbers, then yeah, Braylon Allen, Tanner Mordecai, Chimere Dike, Hunter Wohler on defense, Muma Jongmeta on defense. If you want to look at the numbers and just say, an offensive lineman's not going to be their best player, okay, I'm totally okay with that. But I'm looking at what people think of that player, and Jack Nelson, I believe, is likely to be the highest one taken next year, or will be by the end of this season. Braylon Allen is a fantastic player. I've seen some people saying he's going to go in the first round. I don't think so. No offense to him. It's not an offense to him. It's an offense to running backs in general. And I know, some of these guys like Bijan Robinson, difference maker. Jahmyr Gibbs felt like a little bit of a reach, but I think he's going to be really good in the NFL too for the Lions. But those guys are big time players who could do it in a whole bunch of different ways. Now, if Braylon goes and has a ridiculous season and then runs like a 4.5 and puts up 20 some odd reps in the bench and all that good stuff, then okay, maybe he gets into the first round. But it feels unlikely that that's going to end up being the case. And so if it was between the two, I'd probably go Jack Nelson. right now, maybe it's Braylon, maybe it's Tanner, maybe it's Muma, maybe it's somebody else. But I think at the end of this season, Jack Nelson.
Well, if Jonathan Taylor doesn't go in the first round, I have a hard time seeing anybody from around these parts going in the first round. Like, I know you can debate the mileage he put on, but for God's sake, he was the 2-time Doak Walker Award winner, put up numbers just at a ridiculous rate to get to 6,000 yards in 3 seasons. So no knock on Braylon. We know how the NFL personnel value or don't value running backs based on not paying players what players feel they deserve. I think that's an interesting take that you have. And I pulled up just the NFL draft picks that Wisconsin has had. And let's just look at last season. I mean, would you have said was Joe Tippmann was the best player on the team? Maybe.
I mean,
but Nick Herbig
the best prospect, right? I mean,
Tippmann went first among the Badgers who were drafted.
He did.
So I think it's tough, but I understand your perspective. And certainly a left tackle who's responsible for defending the blind side of your quarterbacks is extremely important. I think either of those answers are good. I'm going to stick with Mordecai, though. I feel like he's in for a very good season.
So, all right, let's get into, you call these superlatives? I don't know. Probably not. Toughest game on Wisconsin's schedule. It feels easy.
If Ohio State's on the schedule, it's the toughest game. I don't care if it's at Camp Randall. They have been a thorn in the Badgers' side, shall we say.
They have been. They definitely have been. Wisconsin has not beaten Ohio State since 2010. They've lost to them in the conference championship game a number of times. They've lost to them in Columbus a number of times, including last year, and what was an embarrassing showing by Wisconsin. And I think the players would say the same thing. A lot of guys pointed to that game, this coming game, as one they were looking forward to because of what happened last year. And yet Wisconsin's been a little bit of a thorn in Ohio State's side at Camp Randall. Last win was 2010, but the last blowout by Ohio State at Camp Randall is 20 plus years ago. It's been a long, long time since it's happened. So I think it's a close game, and Wisconsin, I think it's a close game. Maybe that'll lead you to what I'm going to use in my one bold prediction, but it's going to,
I think you're setting it up.
It's going to be a close game. Wisconsin's easiest game.
Georgia Southern in week 3.
Scott Frost wouldn't agree.
It's got to be that's true. Well, he also doesn't have a job, or Big Ten job. Anyway, it's got to be, to me, one of the non-conference games, and that's the one that I would go with. Wisconsin will have played a couple of games. They'll be getting ready for Big Ten play. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I would say Buffalo, but we then haven't seen Wisconsin yet. So you're trying to go into this with without knowing exactly what Wisconsin is. Georgia Southern would be the answer that jumps out. I think Rutgers is an answer that you could certainly throw out there. They come to Camp Randall after Wisconsin is on a bye, and so they come here. And Northwestern on November 11th. What are they playing for on November 11th? Right? Like
they played Wisconsin tough though over the years.
Over the years they have.
Even when they stink.
Excuse me, November 12th. November 12th is what I meant. Either way, yeah, even when they stink, but this is a different year for them, is it not? Yes. I don't know I don't have no clue what that Northwestern team is going to look like when they roll in here November 12th. Maybe September 2nd, September 9th, they're going to get a fiery Northwestern. I don't know if you're going to get a fiery Northwestern come November 12th. We'll see. A few more here. Wisconsin's most important game.
Well, I'm going to go the Iowa game because Wisconsin and Iowa have been at the top of the West in a lot of years. And if you look at the preseason predictions, they're separated by a point, where Wisconsin was projected to win the West, but Iowa's right there too. And I think they've got a lot to prove this year too, certainly on the offensive side of the ball. And I think Wisconsin is fortunate that game's at Camp Randall Stadium. And I'm going to go with that one because of what I think it will mean for the West Division.
Yeah, I think that stretch of Iowa, Illinois, and then Ohio State is going to kind of be a make or break to the season, whether it's going to be a great season, whether it's going to be a good season, or whether it's going to be a below average or what people expect season. If you go 2-1, then you're probably thinking good. If you go 3-0, you're thinking amazing. And if you go 1-2, well, then probably going to be a below average type of thing. So I would agree with you on that. Another one that sticks out to me in terms of just its importance because of what was last year is Washington State. Going on the road, going into the Pac-4 and trying to get a win there against a team that is probably going to be pretty fired up and is going to be playing you in what is essentially a night game. It's going to be 6 o'clock here, but 4 o'clock out there. It's an opportunity for you to show everybody that Wisconsin is going to be a team to deal with. And so it's early. I know that. That's why it's a little bit tough. But most important non-conference game for sure. For sure. I'm going to go with that.
My argument against that would obviously be that it's not a Big Ten game. So even if they lose.
Yeah, but it's just sets a bad vibe, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that was the start of a bad vibe last year.
Yeah, well, the team wasn't very good. So I can see where you're coming from, but
if they pull that out, maybe it's a little bit different. Maybe they feel a little bit different about themselves. Probably not. No, they're still losing by 85 at Ohio State.
Yeah. Still not crossing midfield until they trail by 4 touchdowns.
Right. Most dangerous trap game.
I don't know if this is considered a trap game because they're on everyone's radar, but you just mentioned that 3-game stretch that is a season-defining stretch. You got Illinois right in the middle. It's on the road in Champaign. On the other hand, I don't know how I can call that a trap game because nobody's going to be forgetting about what happened last year where Illinois out Wisconsin to Wisconsin, and then the next day Paul Chryst was fired. But I'm going to pick that anyway just because it's between 2 massive games. So that's why I'm going with that one.
Yeah, it's impossible for me to pick that as a trap game. It's impossible. After what happened last year, Brett Bielema, the staff's going at it here in recruiting this offseason with some of the stuff that has gone on. And you've got Aaron Henry and, Antonio Finellis, like doing their little dance on Twitter after they flipped Woodward. So like there are some things between these two staffs. I remember Barry Alvarez talking about how there was no love lost between Illinois and Wisconsin staffs back in 1993 because some of those guys had worked down there, right? Yes. And there was some shadiness and there was not shadiness. There was some acrimony between the two staffs. I think that there's some acrimony between the two staffs. And certainly Brett Bielema even kind of talked about it down at Big Ten Media Days and just how there is a different feel around Wisconsin with recruiting. So it's impossible for me to put that as a trap game. It's just impossible. I can't do it. The one that stands out to me is the one that happens the week after Ohio State. You go 3 straight weeks here, right? You get Iowa, at Illinois, home to Ohio State, and then you go to Indiana. Indiana, after that 3-week stretch, and you go to Indiana, sleepy Indiana, and we'll see what that team is like. But they were not very good last year, and Tom Allen's kind of coaching for his job. I think that, to me, is the trap game on this schedule. Because you come down from the 3 big weeks and then you go to Bloomington, sleepy Bloomington, and have to play against an Indiana team that I don't think is that great.
That's a reasonable pick.
I think that's fair. I just can't pick Illinois, and I just can't.
Funny story about the acrimony in the Barry days. I'm sure some people have heard this, but Joe Panos loves to tell it in that 93 season when Barry Alvarez was giving a fire and brimstone speech before Wisconsin played Illinois, and he was stirring them up, and he did not like Lou Tepper, who was the coach at Illinois, and said something to the effect of, and I'm paraphrasing because I wasn't in the room, and when we go out on the field afterward, and I'll kick his ass, and everybody went nuts. And of course they went out and played well. And that's a funny story, but it's always good to have a little acrimony with some of these nearby foes that you play a lot.
Yeah. The funny thing is, though, it's former Wisconsin guys. Like, it's former Wisconsin coaches that are kind of like needling things a little bit. It's kind of funny. And we, kind of saw the same thing up with Minnesota last, negative recruiting that Wisconsin was allegedly doing, according to PJ Fleck. This is a different Wisconsin staff. It's a different Wisconsin staff. They're not going to just accept what things are, I don't think, and probably anger some people in Illinois and anger some people in Minnesota and not really give 2 craps that they do it, which I think a lot of fans are a fan of. Game you're most looking forward to?
It's got to be Ohio State. Anytime the Badgers play the Buckeyes, it's got that special environment, special opportunity because it's been so long. It's going to be a night game at Camp Randall. It's going to be, do the kids say lit anymore? That might have been like a decade ago. I'm showing my age.
No,
It's going to be litty.
It's the summer of Suits. The summer of Suits. I don't know if you've ever seen this TV show. It's on USA. I watched it when it was on, but now it's the most streamed show ever this summer on Netflix. It's Suits, and there's a guy named Louis Litt, and he's an attorney, and he's like, you
What
just
a
got
name.
lit up. What'd you say?
What a name.
Yeah, Louis Litt. You got lit up. So it still works. I think it still works.
Right.
You're right. It is the first time Ohio State's been here since 2016. The night game, the juice around it. Hopefully, both teams are good this year, and you get like a 6-0 versus a 6-0. That could be some fun. I don't know if it's going to be that way, but that's going to be a fun night. That's going to be a fun night. No matter what, it's going to be a fun night. You think back to 2016, they had gone on the road. They were beating LSU earlier in the year. They beaten Michigan State. This was the first of a back-to-back stretch. They had actually 3 games in a row, I believe it was. It was Michigan, or it was Ohio State, Michigan. Then I think they went to Iowa, and then they came home to play Nebraska. I don't know. That was like a 4-game stretch in there. This season doesn't have that, but this 3-game stretch of Iowa, Illinois, Ohio State is kind of close, a little bit. Should be a fun back and forth. And yeah, I think that's the game everyone's looking forward to the most. Trip you're most looking forward to, with the most important thing being media.
Yeah.
Which one are you looking forward to?
Yeah, they say you can't spell media without M and an E, but you also have an I in there, obviously. I'll tell you what I'm not looking forward to is Minnesota in November. You're going to have to get the 4-wheel drive car out and hope you don't have a snowstorm. It's also like Thanksgiving weekend, so I know it's a tradition, but not looking forward to that. The other 4, it's tough. I'm not going to go with Washington State, even though it's a venue I'll probably never be at again, I imagine. And you've got to stay in Spokane, which is over an hour from Pullman. Nobody cares about the reporter stories. I'm inclined. Part of me wants to go Indiana because I have not been to Bloomington to cover a Wisconsin game, oddly enough. They don't go there very often. I've been at some previous outlets that, let's just say, did not value having me at the games. At the Athletic, we're there. So I'm going to go Indiana, even though there's a case to be made for Illinois being the closest drive and Purdue offering the opportunity to play a little golf before the Friday night game.
I mean, I was going to say Purdue for you just because the Red Roof Inn and the state and the
Mountain
state
Jacks.
Wasn't the state place connected to it?
It's not connected, but it's next door. So I've gotten that question every once in a while, like most underrated places to eat on the Big Ten. Mountain Jacks in Lafayette. Holler at your boy. It's like big steak for under $30.
I guarantee you there's not a single person on this beat that's ever stayed at more Red Roof Inns than Jesse Temple.
Well, been at a lot of outlets that also wouldn't pony up the dough. So I don't know, maybe it's just a carryover effect.
Well, you also got stuck in Detroit that one time and didn't realize you had to tell them that you weren't going to be coming in. So you got your entire thing shut off at what hotel was that?
Learned my lesson.
What hotel was that?
Where, in Detroit?
No, in Las Vegas. Because then when you got to Vegas, you didn't have a hotel room.
It was a nice hotel, and there
was a really nice hotel
across the street. Only a couple chalk outlines. I just walked right over them and went to my room. I'm kidding, but
went to your room, and then next door was the strip club.
I mean, we're in Vegas. Yeah, I'm not saying I went.
Right, but like an off strip club.
Yeah, that's fair.
Not great, but hey, it was a fun trip, so it's okay. It all works out, and you didn't get killed, so that's a positive. But again, the only person that's ever enjoyed staying at Red Roof Inn, his name's Jesse Temple.
Sure. What's your pick? Give me one. Give me your pick.
It's not Washington State. I don't like getting on planes and having to fly multiple hours to get to where I'm going. That kind of sucks. The only reason I want to go and I'm excited to go is because it's a place I've never been before. And there are some really nice, fun looking stadiums on the West Coast. When we I got to go to BYU. That was one of the most amazing views that they have. So I don't think Washington State's nearly on that level, but you're right. We're only going to be there once. I would probably say, it's very tough because none of them are great trips this year.
we're all sitting here waiting with bated breath.
I know. All right, screw it. Illinois, because it's the closest. Thank you.
I like it. That's a reasonable pick and a reasonable reason.
All right, before we get to the rest of the show, this is where I'm going to throw in the trivia question for those 2 tickets to the Buffalo game. They are really good seats. They are underneath the overhang. Supposed to be a little bit of warm weather coming up on Saturday. They're outside of the sun, so you won't be hit by the sun at all. But all you have to do here is answer the trivia question, subscribe to our Instagram account, and then send me the right answer to that Instagram account. It's the Camp Podcast. Just subscribe, send me the answer, and I'll pick from all the right answers, and I'll announce the tickets on Tuesday's show. It's very, very easy. And it's a very, very easy question. I wanted to go with, Jesse, and you thought this was going to be way too hard. I wanted to go with what's the warmest game in Camp Randall history, because this one, if it's actually as warm as it's supposed to be, would be the warmest game in Camp Randall history. It's supposed to be in the mid, low 90s, 92 degrees, allegedly. The warmest one now is 90 degrees, and that was Russell Wilson's debut in 2011. That was a really warm one. The BYU 2018 was 87 degrees. It was quite warm. The opener against Western Michigan in 2000, when they had all those suspensions come down the day of, essentially, they beat Western Michigan 17-9, but it was like 88 degrees. I remember that one. I remember all 3 games. All of them were very, very warm. This question, not that hard. Who's the all-time leading rusher in NCAA history? The real all-time leading rusher in NCAA history. And if you get this wrong, not only will you not get the tickets, but you're not going to be allowed to listen to the show ever again. So,
and may God have mercy on your soul.
Yes. So it's very easy. Just go to Instagram, subscribe to the account, give me the right answer, and we'll put you in the running for tickets to the Buffalo game that I'll be announcing on Tuesday's show. All right, let's get back into this. This little confidence picks. I want you to rank how confident, Jesse, you are that these things will happen. Number 1 will be the most likely to happen. Number 4 is least likely to happen. Okay. Got it?
Yeah.
All right. Number 1 on the list, Wisconsin wins the West. Number 2 on the list, Wisconsin's run-pass ratio will be within 2 percentage points of each other. So essentially 51-49, 50-50, 49-51. Tanner Mordecai throws for more than 33 touchdowns, which would beat Russell Wilson's school record. And number 4 on the list, the defense will finish inside the top 20 in overall defense. That's total yards. Give me your ranking of those 4.
I'm most confident in the defense finishing in the top 20. I know you still got some questions, but obviously if I'm going to praise the defense in the previous show, I got to ride that train all the way through. I know that it's a different coordinator, different defense. They got to replace Nick Herbig and Keanu Benton. And yet I've got a lot of confidence in Mike Tressel and the way that he's utilizing these players. Yes, you could say that the back end on paper is stronger than the front end. But that may mean I think the pass defense is going to be better than it was last year. And actually, I believe that the pass defense last year, not that it was atrocious, but in terms of average yards allowed per game, was the highest that it had been in about 15 years. Maybe it was 09 or something like that. And even if the run defense regresses slightly from last year, I don't think it's going to be a lot different. So I'm most confident in the defense. In terms of the other 3, boy, that is tough. What were they? So more than 33 touchdowns for Tanner Mordecai.
Run pass ratio within 2% of each other, and Wisconsin wins the West.
Man, here's the thing. I don't think Mordecai is going to throw for more than 33 touchdowns, and I don't think the run pass ratio is going to be within 2%, but I do think the run pass ratio is going to be pretty close. So that leaves me with Big Ten West champions number 2. Number 3, I'll go run pass ratio. And I suppose I'm least confident in the 33 touchdowns, even though a lot of people might have answered this most confident. I have a hard time seeing Tanner Mordecai get to that number, because I think when they get in the red zone, they're going to remember they have Braylon Allen and Chez Malusi. And so those guys are going to take away some of those scoring opportunities or passing opportunities for Mordecai. I just think if the ratio is going to be close to 50-50, then can't forget about the running backs.
So that year that Russell Wilson threw those 33 touchdowns?
Yep.
How many touchdowns did the running back have that year?
Quite a few.
39.
You're right.
So you don't have to. I don't think
right.
you have to decide on one or the other, right? Like I think Monte had 33 rushing touchdowns and 6 pass receiving touchdowns.
You're right.
I don't think you necessarily have to pick one or the other here. But that again was the highest scoring offense in school history, and they scored 45 points a game. We are, I think, on board here that is not going to be the case. But 33 touchdowns seems possible. I think the run pass ratio is probably the lowest on my list.
Okay.
I think I would probably go the defense number 1.
Yep.
I would probably go Wisconsin wins West 2, Mordecai, and then the run pass ratio. I don't think it's so we're not that far off.
Yeah, that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
I crunched. Go ahead.
No, they just the run pass ratio is just really tough to try and limit it to 51-49 or 50-50 or 49-51, like being within 2 percentage points. That's asking a lot, even though a lot of people think it's going to be right around 50-50. And that's why I did it. Maybe it would have been more fair or more possible for it to be higher up on the list if I went 55-45 or 40, 50-50, whatever it was, whether it's within 5 percentage points. So 40, 53, 47 or something like that. No, that's not within 5 points. You know what I'm saying?
We didn't have to be math majors. We write. We talk.
I do not have a BS.
Well, sometimes
I do have a lot of BS, but I don't have that BS.
Yeah. I have a story running Monday with some of my predictions for the season that's on The Athletic. And so some of the numbers I'm going to reference here are in that story, but that's okay because I think it provides some decent context. I looked at the last 5 starting quarterbacks that Phil Longo has had. So, I mean, that's 5 of his 6 years. The first year he was there at Ole Miss, they had 2 quarterbacks that each played a significant amount. But the last 5 years, the average yards passing and average touchdowns in a season for his starting quarterback was 3,704 passing yards and 30 touchdowns. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to be above 33. I just am hesitant, at least with that number, for whatever reason, to go above it. But the run pass ratio is interesting to me because, and these are some advanced numbers from a service that we use called True Media, but from 2019 to 2022, which are the 4 years that Longo was at North Carolina, UNC used a design run on 45.1% of its snaps and drew up a pass play on 54.9% of its snaps. Now, that's a heck of a lot more even than what we saw from Wisconsin's previous offenses, where they called a design run on 58.2% of snaps. But I don't think it's going to be exactly 50-50. It's just going to look a lot closer to it than what we've seen from past Wisconsin offenses. So that's some of the context that why I'm answering the way that I am.
Yeah, I understand it. All right, little over under here as we zero in on the end of the show. Still got a few more things to get to. Let's stick with Tanner Mordecai.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson's record, 3,175 yards passing in 2011. Over under 3,175 and a half yards for Tanner Mordecai.
Over, for the reason I just mentioned, that the average of the last 5 years from with Phil Longo starting quarterback was over 3,700 yards. I'm not saying he's going to get to that number, but they're going to be throwing it a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of big chunk plays, and I expect him to hit the over. There's a ton of weapons.
Over under 5.5 sacks for Mumajong Meta.
You think Mordecai's going over, by the way?
Yes. Oh, excuse me. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I do think he's going over.
I'm going over.
Sometimes I forget to answer these questions myself.
That's okay. I'm going over with Muma. I think he's in for a monster season. Won't be surprised if he's all conference. He's the team's leading returning sack getter, even though it's a significantly smaller number than what Nick Herbig did. What did he have? 3.5 sacks last year? Muma did. I think he's going to hit the over because he's going to have a big season.
Yeah, I expect him to hit the over. I think a couple of the inside guys will hit the over on 5.5 sacks. I think him and Jake Chaney will both get over it. So we'll see. Chimere Dike. Now when I sent this to you, I said 55.5. And now that I look back at it, I think that's way too low. So I'm going to move it up here. I'm going to say Chimere Dike 65.5.
Wow. For receptions.
Yep.
I'm going under.
Okay. Were you going to go under at 55?
I probably was, to be honest.
Right.
Largely because I think Will Pauling is getting a lot of catches this year. And so's Bryson Green, CJ Williams. I mean, you could go down the list. Skylar Bell. I don't know what Keontez Lewis's numbers are going to look like, but yes, they're going to be throwing it more. But everybody's going to get the ball.
Yeah. My biggest concern, it's not with Chimere, but with Will Pauling. know if you remember this at all, but like the spring of 2017 and Chris James and what he did both in spring and fall camp, a lot of people thought he was going to be the starter and he was going to have a huge season, right? Like just some of the stuff that he did in the spring.
Mhm.
And then Jonathan Taylor came along and blew it out of the water. Is it a possibility that someone could just be like, hey, we see all these guys may not have a number one, and then all of a sudden someone does jump out and is the number one and gets a majority of the catches? Because that's also has been a rather important part of a Phil Longo offense.
Here's the thing about Will Pauling is I can't ignore what Longo says specifically about his slot receivers, how much he loves them, how much he thinks they are the biggest mismatch and advantage that he can use because you get guys in the middle of the field. He's clearly established himself as the number one guy. And yes, Skylar Bell is going to get his share of opportunities as well. But I think when they're looking for a quick hitter or a safety valve or something, that Will's going to be the guy. I mean, Chimere, we know his route running savvy, his leadership, all that stuff. It's outstanding. He's the leading returning receiver in all the major categories. But I just think in this offense, a guy like Will Pauling is so tremendously valuable. And it's hard for me to make the comparison with the Chris James, because I mean, we've seen all the wide receivers for all these practices. He's still a number one guy. And I think based on how we know Longo wants to utilize these guys, I expect him to have a big year. I never saw Jonathan Taylor in practice. I don't even remember seeing him because we saw the first 2 weeks of fall camp. He obviously wasn't there in the spring, and then we know what happened.
Iwan Deal should be an answer to a trivia question at some point. He's the reason Dario Gumbawale got an opportunity to play running back, and that has led to an NFL career. And he's the reason why we've got to see even more of Jonathan Taylor as a freshman. I'm not saying either one of those guys wouldn't have eventually ended up going. JT was obviously just different and would have been amazing and awesome, and no matter what. Maybe it would have taken a little bit longer for him to get on the field if that wasn't the case. But Iwan Deal got hurt in 2014, which led Dario Gumbawale moving from wide cornerback over to running back, and he played a rather significant role for Wisconsin in his couple years there as a running back in 2015 and 2016. And then the following year, Jonathan Taylor was 4th or 5th on the depth chart, at that point. And he jumps up because Iwan Deal gets hurt again, gets an opportunity to scrimmage against number one defense, and the rest is history. Iwan Deal, who in 2015 was actually quite good until he got hurt again. Injuries. What are you going to do? Before we move on to Braylon, I want to talk about rushing, before we get to Braylon Allen's rushing yards, talking about his passing catches. I was not one of these that I threw at you, but Braylon Allen, over under 25.5 catches. Because you mentioned Will Pauling being a security blanket or a check down blanket or a guy that they can just get the ball out to. I think that's the running backs too, based on what we saw in practice.
25.5 is a lot for me. And I know, and I know where I'm coming up with that number, presumably because in 2020, Phil Longo's top 2 running backs each caught 25 passes. I don't think he's going to get that many, even though, as we said, he and Ches both told Phil Longo they'd love 50 receptions, because Ches is going to get a lot of them, and the wide receivers and tight ends as well. He's going to be significantly utilized, and I think he and Ches combined are going to eat up a pretty big chunk of yardage to help Tanner Mordecai surpass Russell Wilson's single season passing yards record. But that just feels like a lot to me. But Jonathan Taylor had 26 catches in the 2019 season, something like that. On the other hand, a little bit different offense, a little bit different ratio in terms of how he was used.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Braylon Allen rushing yards. He's gone over 1,200 these first 2 years. Didn't really get any carries as a freshman until, about a month into the season, really, truly a month into the season, the Illinois game. Over under 1,400 yards rushing this year for Braylon Allen.
What's funny is, and you don't know this, but in my predictions story for Monday, I said 1,400 yards for Braylon. So now I really have to pick whether it's the over or the under. So I'll go 1,401. He gets the over.
It's a number that is certainly doable in Wisconsin history. It's honestly not that big of a deal to get to 1,400.
This is different.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be averaging 100 yards a game, assuming you get to play 14 games. And I guess we'll see if you believe they're going to get to play 14 games or not. But I think it's a doable thing. I don't know that it's going to happen, but I'm going to say over. I'm going to take the over on that as well. Kamoi Latu. I didn't know who to pick for leading intercepting.
Yeah.
The guy who's going to lead them in interceptions. I went with Kamoe. I could have gone with Hunter Wolder. I guess you could have gone with one of the cornerbacks, especially the way Ricardo Hallman got his hands on some passes in spring and fall camp. But Kamoe Latu, over under 3.5 interceptions.
I guess I'll go under. I mean, it's interesting because I'd like to say Hunter Wohler will lead the team, but he's going to be lining up in some different spots closer to the line of scrimmage, and that's going to limit, presumably, interceptions. I don't know who I think is going to lead. I might just go Ricardo Hallman because I have the image of 6 interceptions in 2 practices seared into my mind. And we know what happens in spring practice always, 100% without fail, translates to the season.
Yeah, for sure. As I mentioned before, Chris James. So you went over on that?
I'm going to go under for Latu. I think they're going to get a better number.
You think it's Ricardo that leads them?
I don't know. Honestly, I mean, last year was John Torchio. It's safeties usually lead because they're last line of defense. But I don't know. I don't know why I'm going under on Latu.
I'm going to take the
hard hits, team leader.
He's going to have some. I mean, he's obviously going to be up there, but I don't think Wolder's going to be that far behind.
No.
Both those guys.
They got some dudes. That secondary, I think, is loaded.
They got some dudes that like to hit. All right. Getting to our bold predictions for the season. One bold prediction each. I know you've probably got 10 coming. Is that right?
Only one that's truly the most bold. I think you have a sense of where that's going.
Yeah. So for this one bold prediction here on the camp. Yours. Go ahead.
I've been hesitant to do this because I have never seen it happen. But maybe you talked me into it. How about that? I'll placate you in that way.
We can't take the same one.
Well,
but we're going to.
It's a truly bold prediction to say that Wisconsin's going to beat Ohio State when they haven't done it since 2010. But you're right. They've played them close at Camp Randall. I think they're 3-3 in the last 6. It doesn't happen very often. Those 3 losses came by a touchdown. There's so many factors that, I mean, Ohio State, whoever the quarterback is going to be good, but it's a little bit different situation this year. Night game, Luke Fickell, all that stuff. The other ones, the predictions that I made are not as fun and bold as that one. So let's get crazy. I mean, if we're going to get bold, let's go bold. And you can hound me for my flip-flop here. And now is the forum and the floor for you to do that. But look, I had to make some, and that felt like a good one to make.
Wisconsin and Ohio State, October 28th, Camp Randall Stadium. Jesse Temple says it is going to be the Badgers over the Buckeyes. Is that what we're getting here?
That's what we're getting, but I can't be the only one making that proclamation.
You are not. This guy is as well. Wisconsin over Ohio State, night game, Halloween weekend at Camp Randall Stadium. The Badgers get it done. They break. It's been 13 years, a 13-year curse. They break the 13-year curse. They get it done at Camp Randall Stadium. That is my bold prediction. You know the last time Wisconsin got beat by double digits by Ohio State at home?
I did, but I don't
it's
now.
2000.
2000?
It's 2000. It was 23-7 that year. And they that 2000 team was obviously extremely talented for Wisconsin. They had the Srulock scandal and all that stuff that came into it. But yeah, they were anxious to get back at them because Wisconsin had gone down to Ohio State the previous year, beat them, fell down 17-0, I think it was, and then came back and scored 42 unanswered, 42-17 in Brooks Bollinger's first start. And I think he signed something. They built it, we own it type of thing. That might not have been that year, but there's a famous picture out there with Brooks Bollinger's signature saying that they built it, we own it in terms of Ohio Stadium. So yes, Wisconsin at home, get to beat Ohio State. And that's bold, I guess, because it hasn't happened in 10 years, but Wisconsin's been right there a number of times against the Buckeyes, especially at home. They haven't gotten blown out in quite some time. I know what happened last year. I know this is not the same Ohio State that has didn't have a quarterback or didn't have great quarterbacks and a great offense. But I think Wisconsin's able to stick with it. I think they stick with it and they find a way to win that night and getting the first signature win of the Luke Fickell era. All right, for you, what is considered a successful season?
Man, Hard question. Certainly, I think winning the West, and I think that's probably the barometer for a lot of Badgers fans. On the other hand, this was a team that finished the regular season 6-6 last year. So, I mean, even if they win 8-9 games, I think it's a step in the right direction because to me, this is a whole long game play. Like, I don't expect what Wisconsin is this year to be what Wisconsin is going to be down the road. This is still completely new. So it's probably easier for me to say win the Big Ten West. This is the last year that the divisional split exists in the way that it currently does. Who knows what the hell is going to happen with 4 more teams joining? They're going to have to change some things, but that's what I would say.
Yeah. This was a fill in the blank, so I didn't do you very well there. But yeah, it will be considered a successful season if, and win the Big Ten West would also be my answer. I think that's a successful season. Put yourself in a position to go and compete for a Big Ten championship. And if you're, we'll see in terms of what the record's going to be, but if you're right there, why not? You have a chance to win the Big Ten, and you also have a chance, assuming you don't lose more than 2 games going into that, to be in the playoff. But that feels a little bit, maybe that would have been the bold prediction to make. They're going to be in the college football playoff this year. No. All right, let's get to our picks, our season picks. Let's start in the East. Who do you have winning the Big Ten East?
Michigan. I guess that's the easy one because they've done it the last 2 years. Does it matter who coaches them the first 3 games? I don't know. They're going to have a carousel. So
it does. I guess it does not. And who do you have in the West?
I'm going to go Wisconsin. I believe Wisconsin's going to win the West. I mean, look, even if they lose to Ohio State, there's going to be ample opportunity in this division to take control. And that 3-week stretch is going to tell us a lot, obviously.
I'm going to take Ohio State in the East. I'm going to take Wisconsin in the West. Big Ten championship game.
Yeah.
Who do you got?
Well, whatever East team's playing Wisconsin. I'm not willing to go that far yet.
Not that bold.
Not ready to die on that hill. It's one thing to win at home in a night game against a really good team. It's another to replicate a feat like that in the Big Ten championship. Not saying it won't happen. They've certainly been close the last couple times. Made Ohio State sweat quite a bit in 2017 and 2019 for the first half until the real Ohio State showed up. But whatever team in the East is there, and I don't think the East has lost, right, to the West in...
They've never done it. No.
Ever. So don't think this is going to be the first year.
No, it hasn't happened. So whatever. I think who are the East teams that have won it? Penn State's won it. Ohio State's won it. Michigan
State beat Iowa to go to the playoff in that year where
2015. Yep.
Yeah, it was right at
Michigan
the goal
State and Wisconsin's won it. Are those all the teams that have won the championship? The Big Ten conference title?
I believe so.
The Big Ten championship game, because obviously it was Legends and Leaders before it went to East-West. Trying to think 2013, who won it in 2013? Was it Ohio State that won it? Or no, they lost to Michigan State that year. And then there's that famous picture of Urban Meyer eating pizza after the game. Because 2013 was the year that Michigan State went to the playoff in 2015 and got smacked by Alabama. But the 2013 game is the Urban Meyer pizza game, I think. So, yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's whoever comes out of the East. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Penn State. They've got a lot of talent. And when you look at, and it really comes back to the quarterback and whether Villar can be that guy. But if he is, they've got a good shot finally to break through and get back to the championship game for the first time since 2016. All right. Over under wins. We didn't do this. I wanted to save this one for the end. I set it at 8.5 because that's what odds makers have set Wisconsin's over under at. What do you have? Is that you taking the over? Or you taking the under?
I'm taking the over. I think a lot of people are taking the over.
Yes.
I don't know what that looks like. I do think this is a team capable of winning double-digit games, and maybe they go in at 10-2. Obviously, I mean, you might be sitting there thinking, well, if you believe they're going to beat Ohio State, how could they lose 2 games? But there's a lot of toss-up games in the Big Ten, and you can be really great one night and less great another night. I don't think it's outlandish to suggest Wisconsin can go 10-2 and win the Big Ten West. We've seen a lot of Wisconsin teams like that in previous seasons. So that's where I'm at right now.
Who are your 2 losses?
Yeah, well, that's where it gets tricky.
Well, here's the thing about that. The bold prediction, that's a bold prediction. It doesn't mean that you think it's actually going to happen. You don't have to necessarily say, I'm going out there, I'm going to say they're going to beat Ohio State. But then in your prediction wise, and I'm guessing you're probably a champion at this, putting it out there and then, nope, they're going to go 10-2. They're going to lose to Ohio State and they're going to go to Illinois and lose. And those are going to be their 2 losses.
Yeah. I mean, God, I don't know. It's like they haven't lost to Purdue in 16 years. I don't see that one happening, even though it's a Friday night Big Ten opener.
It's been longer than that.
Is it 18?
Yeah, they haven't lost them since 03, so it's been 20.
Okay, well, yeah, long time. I don't know if they would lose to a Washington State, and I mean, I think that's less significant of a loss than some of these Big Ten. I just think we've seen a lot of Wisconsin teams slip up in a game that you didn't expect, but I don't know which one that's going to be. I will say it's not going to be Minnesota. No way Luke Fickell in year 1 is going down there and losing to the Fighting Flex.
Losing to PJ and his bank down there, or up there, I should say. Yeah, so I asked this question on Twitter, and when you mentioned a lot of people are thinking they're going to be better than 8.5, yes. A majority of the people that I asked, that when I took the poll on Twitter or X, whatever, what was taking me so long was trying to find the Twitter tab on my computer, and I still don't understand X. X is Twitter. Either way, how many wins for Wisconsin this year? 10 or more got 54.4% of the vote. 9 or more, or 9, I should say, got 36.9%. So there was only about 8% of the people that think they're going to go 8 or less. 10 or more, I don't know if people are thinking 10. Maybe they're thinking 11. Anybody thinking 12, Jesse?
I can't imagine. Maybe a handful. It's important to keep in mind the voting membership here. I mean, Badgers fans are the ones making those votes. I wonder what the national perception would be.
Who cares what the national perception is? Like, I don't care what opposing fans have to say about Wisconsin. I think most Wisconsin fans, like when they're going and if they were to vote on somebody else's poll, would say they're going to win 1 game or 2 games. Like if they had a chance like that, it's almost as worthless as, home fans just saying, oh, my team's awesome, I'm just going to pick 10 or more. I'm going to go with the 54% as well. I'm going to go 10 or more. I'm going to say 11-1.
Who's the L to?
Well, you didn't have to choose. I'm not going to choose.
I mean, at least gave you some options.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking there's a chance, depending on what their quarterback situation looks like, that going to Illinois is not going to be as easy as a lot of people think it is. And that one may catch them.
Who thinks it's going to be easy? Because I think Illinois shown.
Well, you called it a trap game. So, I mean, the fact that you called it a trap game would suggest that it somehow wouldn't stick out and punch people in the face.
You know my rationale for why I'm describing it as a trap game, because it's between 2 other massive games. It doesn't mean that like Illinois is some overlooked peon here. They crushed Wisconsin last season.
Which makes it impossible to forget, which makes it impossible to be a trap game. A trap game is where you just like mail it in and you just don't even think about it. And, we got Iowa this weekend, nobody in week 2. And then we got Ohio State. No, you've got Iowa, you got Illinois, and you've got Ohio State. All 3 who took you to the woodshed last year.
Yeah. You
need and want to think that your guys are going to understand that and remember it and get pumped up for it. And I think they will. So it makes it impossible for that to be a trap game in my mind. Bloomington after Ohio State, yes.
All right. No one's mailing it in with Fickell in charge, by the way. He will make sure of that.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. So you got 10-2. I got 11-1. I guarantee you, I probably gonna have to eat that 11-1. I guarantee I'm gonna have to eat that 11-1, but that's okay. That's all right. What's the point of making predictions if they're going to be not worth it, right? 11-1. All right, we'll be back on Tuesday. Again, make sure to answer the trivia question. The all-time leading rusher, the true all-time leading rusher in NCAA history. Go to our Instagram, subscribe, send me the right answer, and you're going to be in the running for 2 tickets to the Buffalo game. We'll be back on Tuesday, and then again, big Thursday coming. Temple and Heilprin live from Monk's Bar and Grill in Sun Prairie from 6 to 7. All right, Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.